This episode of The Edge is brought to you by Audible.com, offering more than 180,000 titles for smartphone, tablet, and desktop. To get a free audiobook of your choice and help Trek.fm at the same time, visit audibletrial.com/trekfm. And also by Enterprise in Space, an international program of the nonprofit National Space Society. Find out how you can help science and education and become a virtual crew member aboard the NSS Enterprise Orbiter by visiting enterpriseinspace.org. And if you want to join the conversation and share your thoughts on this episode, join the Babel Conference, our listeners group on Facebook. Just type BABEL into the Facebook search field. We look forward to seeing you there.
You're listening to Trek FM.
What have you done out there on the edge of Federation space?
Welcome to The Edge, Trek FM's podcast dedicated to the newest Star Trek television series, Star Trek Discovery. I'm your host today, Brandon-Shea Mutala, and joining me are my co-hosts, Mike Schindler and Amy Nelson. How are you doing, guys?
Great. You know, aside from the fact that there's no Discovery on tonight.
Yeah, we're recording this on Sunday, and there's no Star Trek tonight. That's so sad. But you know what's great? My daughter and I were in the van today, and we were driving around talking, and Aubrey's like, well, can we rewatch them before January? Because I don't know if I can wait that long. So that made me pretty happy.
Yeah, as long as you pay your $6.
Well, I got a package with Crave where it was 45 Canadian for, I think it was 5 months or something like that. And it was supposed to take me from whenever the start of Discovery is till the end of Discovery. Maybe it's 6 months, I'm not quite sure. But you just paid a one solid price to have it. It was like a Discovery sale. So that's how I paid for mine. So I'll have it all over the Christmas season and stuff here too.
45 Canadian, that's like $7 American, right? So,
yeah, pretty much.
Yeah,
I know, it's dirt cheap.
Pretty good deal. Yeah.
Ha ha!
Like a cup of coffee.
Like a cup of coffee. We've got a special guest joining us today as well from all the way in another dimension. Tom Elliott from the Twilight Zone podcast. How are you doing, my friend?
I am doing great, Brandon. Thanks so much for having me on. I have been loving Trek FM's coverage, so to be here talking about Discovery, it's really an honor. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're very welcome. We're glad to have you. We're going to plug it now, and we'll plug it at the end. If you guys aren't aware of the Twilight Zone podcast, you got to check it out. He does a really good job. He does some really in-depth, deep dives into the creation of the episode for all these different episodes of the Twilight Zone. He'll read short stories that inspired the Twilight Zone. He'll do interviews with people who are writing books about it. You did an interview with his daughter. Is it Carol Serling or Anne Serling?
Anne Serling.
Anne Serling. Yeah, Carol was his wife. And, you know, he's done some really great stuff over there on the Twilight Zone podcast, so check it out. He's also been on Melodic Treks. I don't have the number in front of me right now, but we talked about some Jerry Goldsmith music from the Twilight Zone, and he was on an episode of Commentary Trek Stars back in the day. Yeah. So Tom is no stranger to Trek FM. We're happy to have him back. And maybe we can get him on in the future again if we're lucky.
Or maybe once the Twilight Zone show starts on CBS All Access and he's doing 5 shows a day, he can have us on for 1 or 2 of those. So,
well, I've got plans. If it happens, I've got plans. I'm going to need everyone I can get. So yeah, let's do it.
Right.
Yeah, we're all excited for that. I mean, there's so much speculation as to what might be filling the void, and there's this announcement that we're going to have this new Twilight Zone show by the guy that did Get Out. So that's very exciting. I mean, it's one of the topics that you've discussed frequently on your podcast is, would the Twilight Zone work now? And I think shows like Black Mirror show that it definitely could work right now. So I'm very excited to see what they would do. Like Black Mirror itself works very well in an hour format. I've only seen the first season myself, but you know, Twilight Zone's kind of notorious for its 4th season being an hour long, and it didn't quite work as well as the rest of it. So it'll be interesting to see what they decide to do with it. But, you know, even in the 80s, which you're covering in your Patreon bonus, you know, they did an hour episode, but it would be like 3 short episodes or something like that, 2 or 3 short episodes. So it'll be interesting to see what's going to happen. So
Yeah.
Anywho, that's our Twilight Zone tangent for the day. I've got that out of the way. We're not here to talk about Twilight Zone. We're here to talk about Star Trek Discovery. And we've just wrapped up the first 9 episodes of Season 1. We're about to enter the fallow months of no Star Trek Discovery for 8 weeks. And we just want to take a general look back and see what we've seen over the last 9 episodes. So the first thing I want to touch on is the design of the show. And what do you guys think of how the show looks? Tom, I'll start with you as our guest today. What do you think of the design of the show and how it compares to other Star Treks?
Well, I'll just briefly say, I think I come to this as a bit of a casual fan. You know, back in the day, The Next Generation was my thing. I was a huge Next Generation fan, and I think that's always going to be my Star Trek, you know, whatever comes next. So, but I did kind of get a bit of Star Trek fatigue after that ended with the shows coming out. I never really took notice, and I kind of left it behind until Discovery came. So I don't come to it with much baggage, you know what I mean, because I didn't keep track of the other shows, and I guess I'm a little bit less precious about, you know, whether it fits in with this show or that show. I kind of come to it like, you know, just give me what you got, just show me what you're doing. And, you know, I think the show looks great. I don't really think about it in context with the original series, because it must be like 30 years since I watched that show. So I come to it very fresh, and I think it looks great. It looks Star Trek to me. I've got no issues with it, and I'm happy with whatever choices they've made. Even, you know, the Klingons and so on. I've got no issues with it.
That's really interesting, because you've got this break of in between of your fandom, and you're almost coming at it fresh, right? And, you know, a lot of the Star Trek fan groups online, the design of the show and how the special effects look have been a little bit divisive. I think that the negative voices are a little bit louder than they actually are. I think they're loud, but there's not as many. But, I mean, do you think that it would be funny or strange coming into a Star Trek show 30 years after Next Generation and having it look like the Next Generation? What would you think about that as a casual fan?
I just think it'd be really difficult to pull off, you know. I think if they tried to sort of fit it into the timeline with some sort of retro pastiche look to it, you know, it almost would come off as some sort of as a little bit of a pastiche, and I think that would detract from the show itself. I think they needed to come to it and say, okay, it's a new time, let's just do the show as we need it to look at, because we're making it in a different time.
Mm-hmm. Amy, how do you feel about the look of the Star Trek Discovery?
Well, I've heard a lot of people discuss it. As you know, I do postcards, and so I sort of know or hear what the fans have to say. And one of their big arguments is, well, we have Star Trek Continues, and that's a show that's produced nowadays but still has that old TOS feel. And although that is true, I don't think that they have the budget like CBS does. I, for one, am very happy that the show is as beautiful and well done as it is. Like and Mike was there at Star Trek Las Vegas to see the detail and amount of work that goes into every single bit, from the boots and the uniforms and the Klingon, helmets, and just everything is so just down to the smallest details, just very Star Trek-y. And I have loved seeing that on screen, because I got to see it in person. So I really like it. And I'm just a casual viewer of Star Trek, nothing major like in the film industry like Mike is. But I think it's so cinematic. I look at it every single week and going, this is like a mini movie. And I don't see anything like this on TV. And I just love it. It, to me, makes it feel Star Trek.
Mike?
I think the the show looks very good on the whole. I mean, obviously there are those two sides to it. It's like, how does it fit into what's been established, and also how does it look as a series produced, in 2017. And I think that, as far as the latter is concerned, it looks really good. I think the sets are amazing. I think that the costumes are really cool and everything. The look of the Klingons is great and all that stuff. The fact that they've, updated some things and it may not mesh canonically with, the stuff that came out in 1966. I mean, of course that's going to be an issue. They decided to go a certain way with it, which is fine. I don't think that I would have necessarily gone this far away from the look of stuff. I probably would have taken more of like a Kelvin timeline approach, where it's like use the originals as sort of like the basis for what you're doing, but update them for a modern aesthetic so that it actually looks like it was made today and not 50 years ago. That's probably what I would have done, but that's a choice. And you got, as a viewer, you have to surrender yourself to the artist's vision, even if you don't agree with it, right? So that's what I'm doing. I will say that as far as like the ship design and stuff is concerned, I really love it. I love the fact that they took this unused design from the 70s and updated it today, put a little spin on it. See what I did there? And I came up with what we have, which I think is one of the coolest looking ships we've ever had. So as far as like the ship design and everything, I think that it's A+ for sure.
Do you remember when the fans first saw the ship and all the complaints that everyone had about it?
Oh,
it's
dear
crazy.
Lord, yes, I do. I like the design of the ship. It's definitely grown on me. At first, just the angular design of the secondary hull was a little bit offsetting, but I really like the design of the show, and I don't mind that it doesn't, whether or not it does technically fit within the design aesthetic of Star Trek. It is a modern show. It is modern television. As for the design of the show and the way that it's done, the only thing that still really bothers me is these weird Batman 1966 angles that we're always getting. And the, what are they called? Dutch angles?
Yeah.
I don't like that. And I don't know. I wish they wouldn't do that. And the only other thing is I wish they would let the show breathe a little bit more. It's still too tightly edited for my liking. With streaming shows, you could put another 3 or 4 minutes into every single one of these episodes of just letting scenes breathe a little bit. You mentioned in a commentary the other day with Max when they were beaming over to the ship, and you're like, oh yeah, that was ADR. And it's like they don't, in a show for streaming services, ADR shouldn't be a thing. When you're trying to edit stuff in, just film it and show people talking. Like, it doesn't have to be this tightly edited, I don't think. But that's just my personal preference for television nowadays. I like my shows to breathe. I like to see shots. I like to see what I'm looking at. And with this show, it's just cutting so quickly all the time that we're not being able to get the chance to just enjoy what we're looking at, because it is such a beautiful show and the special effects are so amazing. Just let it breathe. Let me see the hard work that you guys have put into this show. That's what I'm craving the most out of this show right now.
Yeah, I can totally agree with you. And thinking back on as I watch it, it's like it's just one, next, go, go, go. And it's like, yeah, can I see it and then let it sit with me for even 5 seconds before the next scene and the next action and the next, part comes. I agree with that statement.
Yeah, I
don't think Mike does.
Yeah, I don't. Sorry. I mean, whatever. I understand, especially when we're talking about the design and everything. I totally understand the desire as a fan to see everything, to see, maybe a bunch of tableaus where we can, dissect what's on screen. But I think that there's a way to do that now, which would be a lot more effective. I don't see any reason why we can't have, as a supplement to the app or something like that, like a 3D walkthrough of the disco or whatever, super duper close up intense, photos of the costumes or whatever. and then not have to worry about doing that on the show just to kind of like satisfy that urge, I guess, but I don't know. I think the show is like extremely well paced. I never feel like it's rushed. I think that it's fast and intense. George Lucas probably likes it a lot, but I don't think that it's rushed. And I mean, that could just be my personal thing. I mean, I tend to like, that aesthetic, these action movies or whatever, which are, cut. I think that works really well as a storytelling device. I think that it's kind of like informed by people's viewing habits. I mean, from music videos on up through Vine or whatever it is the kids are watching these days. It works for me. I don't know. It works for me for sure.
Tom, what do you think? Because we watched the Twilight Zone, and the Twilight Zone has got it's definitely got a paced feel to it, right? It's not it's not quick. It's not slow by any means. But I mean, I look at an episode like The Monsters are doing Maple Street, and they've got that slow pan of that guy walking by with the hammer. They're showing the hammer on his belt pocket when he's walking back towards the street, right? And they take their time with it. It's not like a quick cut. What do you feel about the pacing of the show?
I can honestly say that until you mentioned it now, it's never really been a problem for me. Okay. And I mean, it hasn't become a problem for me just because you mentioned it, but I think maybe I'm just acclimatized to how TV is now. I watch all the Marvel Netflix shows, that kind of thing, and they are very choppy and they're very quick. But what I've also been watching lately is The Next Generation. I've been catching up with that again after 20 years. And it is, when you put the two side by side, It is, quite a difference. The Next Generation is almost relaxing to watch these days, because which is good. It's a nice thing. It's a nice little escape to kind of get back to that. But I'm okay with having the two.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't have anything against like a slower pace. I mean, did you guys ever see Jerry, which is like literally just like Casey Affleck and Matt Damon walking through the desert for like an hour and a half? Like, there's literally like 10 minutes shots of just them walking through the desert. Like, I love that movie.
Amazing.
It's great. Gus Van Sant, check it out. But
Gus, you've got me sold.
There you
Gus
go,
Van Sant right there.
It's the second movie in his Death trilogy. Yeah. So anyway, I'm totally okay with that. I love long shots. I love all that stuff. But I don't think that there's a problem with what they're doing here. I love this aesthetic as well. And I think that for what they're going for and what they're doing, it works really well.
Well, like, I go back to that shot in True Detective. I think it was episode 4 or 5, and they had this crazy sequence in it, and it was like a 10 or a 12-minute take.
Yeah.
And it was amazing.
Right.
Like, they had it going around, the camera was going up and over fences and going in and outdoors, and it was like moving around all over the place. And I realize you can't really do that on a Star Trek show, something like that, because you're not in a scene like that. But maybe they could have done that on the Klingon ship. Maybe they could have just done like a follow them around shot on the Klingon ship. I just think that would have been really cool.
Okay, so it's not as good as, maybe the best television show of all time. Okay, that's fair. I'll agree with you there.
Anyways, so we've got our designs of the show. Everything looks a little different. We got the spore drive. What do you guys think of the look of the spore drive? I'm going to tangent for a bit. I don't know, like when it drops. It looks cool, but it's like, would it really work that way? Like dropping and then dropping somewhere else?
We talk about this at length on the latest commentary, and I'd say, who cares? It looks amazing.
I know, you talked about your ka-chunk, but
yeah,
the sound, right? But,
yeah.
I'm going off on a tangent here, so.
And what's the purpose of the spinning? I still don't quite understand.
It's supposed to look awesome, and it does.
All right.
Okay, well, let's talk about the spinning here for a second. So, was this ship designed specifically for the spore drive, or was this ship designed and then they decided to use it for their search of the spore drive? Because I've got the feeling that this spinning section of the hull is in some bizarre way directly the result of the spore drive being used, right? So are they like, hey, we got our spore drive and it works like this, so we better add this spinning saucer section? I don't know.
That was my assumption, especially since like the other ship which had the spore drive. I mean, maybe. I mean, they're talking about trying to get the spore drive to to work on all the ships in the Federation. So who knows exactly? Maybe they had this design and they were like, if we modify it a little bit, then we can get the spore drive to work. But this design is best suited for that thing. I don't know, but I got the impression that was sort of an integral part of the spore drive, was the spinning of the saucer section, and that it wouldn't spin if it weren't for the spore drive.
Mm-hmm. Tom, what do you think about that? Do you think it's neat? Do you think it's just a design coolness, or do you think it's cheesy?
I like it. I can't even get into the whys or wherefores of it, to be honest. I mean, the dropping thing you mentioned, I quite like that too, because obviously this is something that they're using, but they don't really understand it completely. They're still trying to get to grips with what exactly this thing is. So for the ship to do something that is beyond our understanding too, it's sort of not conforming to the usual way of movement. I kind of like that because it kind of fits in with this whole what are we doing with this thing? How exactly does it work? So the spinning thing, I'm not too sure on. It just looks cool to me, I guess.
So one of the things that I noticed with Star Trek Enterprise when I did my rewatch last year From There to Here is Future Guy. When we first see Future Guy, his voice is weird because there's this pre-echo of the way that he talks. And if you watch in Broken Bow, and I think it's the first 2 times that you see him, he's got this weird echo in his room and everything like that. But later on, they kind of drop that and it goes away. And one of the things that they've dropped with Discovery is this moisture on the walls and stuff that happens when they do their black alert. Do you think that's something with the, I don't know, let's be fans and retcon this. Like, why would they drop that? Do you think it's just as like, okay, this isn't really working? Or do you think it's, okay, well, I don't even know. Why do you think they would drop that? Because we haven't really seen it since episode 3 or 4.
Did it stop happening once they got the tardigrade?
That's
and
what I'm
started
thinking.
to use that? Maybe that's what it is, it was some sort of side effect of not having that thing in place, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
I just kind of assumed it was one of those things where they were like, no one will notice, I mean, did we ever notice, aside from when we were like looking at it directly, I don't know.
Well, they made such a concerted effort to show that, though, right? Like, they took it, and Burnham's like looking at what's going on here. There's this weird water.
Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, but it stopped after they had the tardigrade, and then Stamets, now has the tardigrade DNA. So I think it was just a side effect from the arboretum and the plants or whatever that they were using, that it wasn't as efficient as the tardigrade DNA. Mm-hmm. So the byproduct is gone of the water.
Okay. Well, before we move on to our next topic here, is there anything else you guys want to say about the design of the show? No?
Do Klingons come under the design of the show?
Sure, let's do it.
I mean, they've been talked about to death, so I do apologize if I'm just going over old ground. But, I think, this might ruffle a few people's feathers, but I watched the first episode of Enterprise for the first time ever in my life the other day. And there's a few Klingons on there, and I thought, man, if these Klingons were in Discovery, I don't think it'd be quite as effective. And I know some people at home might be like, at that. But I think we got so used to Klingons kind of being our friends over the years that I think if they'd have had that design in Discovery, I don't think it would have been so effective, because the Discovery ones are so vicious looking, so alien looking, that I try and picture classic Klingons in there, and I just can't see it being as effective. So, I know that's a very sort of touchy subject with some people, but I think they made the right choice. And some people might say, well, they should have used a different alien then, and that's fair enough, but, I like what they did.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's just one of those things that you have to update. Klingons have been updated since the dawn of time, or since 1979, whatever. And, it's just one of those things that happens. So, hey,
Yeah, the design of the Klingons, it didn't bother me as much as it bothered a lot of people. Like, it didn't bother me at all. But, that was one of those death knells that the fans that were trying to shut down. I don't know if they're trying to shut down the show before it even aired, or what they think they're going to do. Like, so, Amy, Klingons are all over Next Gen. What did you think of them? How do you think of them now, actually? Let's just change that. Okay,
so I'm wondering, I get why they changed the Klingons. I mean, just like Tom was saying, that, these need to be, our enemy, and they need to look fierce, and we need to be scared of them. So I appreciate the change with that. And so I just I wonder, like, why did they not also change the look of the Vulcans? Is it still because, we're still working with them? They're, is that the reason why? I mean, why not change the Vulcan look as well?
I think the Vulcan look has always been so simplistic. It's just been, guys with pointy ears, like, that's it. And there's one Vulcan in particular which sort of like stands above all the others in terms of, like what people think about. Like, they don't think about Vulcans, they think about Spock, and Spock is just the guy with the pointy ears. So I don't really think there's that need to change the Vulcans to make them look more alien, because then I think you are kind of like crossing a line in terms of like just people's brains and the way that they perceive, whatever, especially since you're going to have, like Vulcans who we've seen before in this. I think that's just hitting too close to home, and not really necessary either,
Mm-hmm. Well, let's jump onto the format of the show. And, I'm going to state it again. This really reminds me more of Season 3 of Enterprise with the Xindi arc, the way that the story is being revealed to us, rather than one of the shows that's happening right now, like Walking Dead or Game of Thrones. Walking Dead or Game of Thrones, they'll take a story, and that's the story for the season. And each episode generally progresses that story, but it's being told from different characters' point of views. And you'll just get an episode that might focus on one or two characters. And in this here, there's a lot more individual stories and contained stories than I thought that there was going to be. So I'm really interested with that. That's not a bad thing. I don't think it's a bad thing. It's just interesting, because I thought they would be going with more of the full story arc. Like the Mud episode, that could really be completely taken out, and it doesn't. The rest of the season is not affected. That doesn't mean it's a bad episode. It's just there's really not very many ties, other than the fact that we saw Mud once before. We could see Mud again, and that could be our return of Mud. What do you think about that, Mike?
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm okay with the way it is. I kind of wish it was a bit more continuity driven, even more so than it is. I wish that there was less kind of like separation between the episodes. And I know that that's something which, they're always struggling with. Like, every show is struggling with it, because you want to have, a complete 45-minute thing which works on its own in some sort of context. But you also want to make this entire thing, it's a cohesive whole. And I think that they could do more in terms of the serialization. I think that they could eliminate things like that episode with the time loop thing, in order to sort of like streamline the series. But I don't necessarily have a huge problem with it. I mean, that's one of my favorite episodes of the show so far. So you got to kind of like take the good with the bad, I guess. But I do wish it was a bit more continuity driven than it is.
Amy?
Yeah, because I love TNG, I really love my episodic TV, and so this is very. It frustrates me sometimes, but I watch Game of Thrones, and so I understand how TV is told nowadays, and I really enjoy it. One thing that I am very, very glad for is that they didn't do, like Netflix does, just a dump of all 15 seasons. Like, I am so glad that we have a week to
Process
think
it.
about, and to talk about. Obviously, we have a lot of shows going on with it, and we wouldn't have been able to do that if all of them just came dumping into our, feed, into our stream. So I really like that we get this week after week after week. I mean, because Stranger Things 2 came out, and like a fool, I binge watched all of them. I had a day off and I felt so guilty about it, but oh my gosh, I just kept, and the next one's going to start in 5 seconds. Well, I guess I'll watch the next one. But then I can't remember, the details because it's all just mushed into one big long day. And I would not have wanted that for my beloved Star Trek.
Yeah. Tom, what do you think? I agree with Amy, what she's saying, and I tweeted that out. I'm like, I'm glad this is coming out week by week because I can process it and I can watch it 4 times and pick out some of the details. And I binge watched Stranger Things too. I don't know when I'm going to get back to it. Probably never, So what do you think, Tom?
I think I too am glad, not only for that, but because it's been great just listening to Trek FM, afterwards throughout the week. I really looked forward to watching the episodes and then catching each of the Trek FM shows throughout the week. But I like the balance. We do live in a time when the season arc is king, and they could have gone with that, and to a degree they have, but I kind of like that they've still paid homage to what Star Trek was occasionally with these episodic shows. I think perhaps by doing it this way, and I guess we are only, a few episodes in, but maybe we don't know the characters as well as we might have done in one of the classic shows, because a lot of the classic shows, everyone would take a back seat to someone's on a planet and they get trapped with someone else. And then, it's just the whole episode is them talking to each other and getting to know those characters really, inside and out. Whereas this, I don't maybe think we know them quite as well as we do in the other shows, because it is a bit quicker, because they are paying attention to the arc a bit more. But that's just the time we live in.
Now, you had mentioned, I don't watch them, but you had mentioned you follow along with the Marvel shows. How is the storytelling arc of Star Trek comparing to the storytelling arc of, say, The Flash or something like that? Forgive me if I'm getting my universes crossed here, now that I think about that. I really don't follow any of the superhero stuff.
You think we've had some hate mail before now? You just called Flash part of the Marvel universe?
DC, I don't know. I'm sorry. I really don't follow it. I'm not trying to troll anybody. I don't know.
That's okay, man. We'll let you off with that.
So what's a Marvel show then that you watch?
Well, something like Daredevil.
Okay, there you go.
It is a case of the season. The season arc is king. They wouldn't stop for like the time loop episode in this one. They wouldn't stop to tell a story like that. It's just like the story moves on and on and on. So it is quite different.
Okay. Daredevil, Flash, what's the difference?
They're all the same.
They both wear red.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway,
it's all about Jessica Jones anyway, so
Anything else on the format of the show? There's not really much to talk about. I'm just surprised that I really was hoping that they would go in with a more solid season-long arc than they have done. But I mean, that doesn't mean I'm not enjoying the show. That's just, I love that type of storytelling that's going on with TV right now. Anybody else have anything else they want to say on the format?
Nope.
Well, let's move on to the characters. So we've got quite the diverse cast of people running this ship. We've got Captain Lorca. But the interesting thing is, all of these people aren't the primary people. Like, we don't have the chief engineer. We realized that there was that one screenshot error where they called Stamets the chief engineer in that one shot, but he's not really the chief engineer. Culber is not the chief medical officer. He's just a doctor there. And we're not really seeing these people You know, like it's really these lower decks characters that we're seeing. So that's really interesting. So we got Culber, we got Saru, we got Stamets, we got Lorca, we got Burnham, we got Tilly, and who else am I missing here? Stamets,
Tyler,
Voke, whatever you want to call them. So, what do we think? Does anybody have a favorite character so far? Tom, who's your favorite character in the season so far?
I mean, I'm all about Lorca, to be honest. I love Jason Isaacs. You know, I'm not sure what he's most known for in the States, maybe Harry Potter or something like that, but he's done a lot of Armageddon. Okay. But he's done, you know, a load of stuff on British TV before, and I think he's one of those kind of breed of like British Royal Shakespeare Company kind of actors, like Patrick Stewart, like Ian McKellen, who just have a certain gravity about them. And to have a captain like this who, you know, I don't want to take up too much time, but I think the legend of Captain Kirk, possibly I'm getting this from the Shatnerverse novels, the legend of Kirk was that Kirk would always find a way, and then we'd all go home for tea and medals. And that's probably not exactly how it was all the time, but I think
that's pretty close. I think
that's kind of what the legend of Kirk is. But this is a captain; he's going to find a way. But you know, we're not all necessarily going to come home at the end of it and you know, drink tea and you know have a happy old time, because he's going to do what needs to be done. But it's not necessarily going to be as clean as Kirk's going to do it.
Mike, who would you say your favorite character is so far?
I guess I'd have to go with Tilly. She just seems to have such a unique perspective from everyone else. You know, she's new, she's excited, she's, you know, very, very enthusiastic about everything that's happening, when I think everyone else is sort of in a place where they're just like, this is the worst. Like, this is literally the worst. And she's just like, we're getting to do this thing, guys. You know what? Maybe we should all appreciate what's going on here. And I think that's pretty cool. And I think that she's really funny. So, yeah, Tilly. She's my favorite.
Amy?
So I am going to say Michael Burnham. For some reason, I identify with her, and I recognize her character and what she's going through and the struggles and what she does to overcome it. I find inspirational. And my second would be Lorca, though, because he's the one that I'm guessing constantly and going back and forth with him. Do I like him? Do I not like him? So he's the most interesting to me, but I identify with Michael the most.
Okay. I've been watching season 7 of Walking Dead right now. Like, I didn't have time because of the Trek FM rewatch last year, and she's a pretty good actress. Like, her character Sasha on Walking Dead is very different from Michael Burnham. Like, she's, you know, I thought they'd be maybe similar. I don't know, but yeah, they're very, very different. She's doing a really good job. I like it. I think my favorite's Saru. Definitely followed very close, just a smidge behind is Tilly. But I'm really liking Saru. I've always liked the alien crew members. Spock, Data, Odo, you know, Neelix is my favorite on Voyager. Yes, I said it. Neelix is my favorite character on Voyager, and I don't care what anybody says about that. Neelix is awesome. And, you know, Phlox, right? Like, those are always been my favorite characters on Star Trek, and Saru is following in that grand tradition. And, you know, while I was a little bit let down with episode 8 just because of what I was expecting, and the episode ended up not being what I was expecting. It was something else. That doesn't mean the episode's bad. I was just thinking we were going to go to Saru's home planet or something like that was what I was expecting out of it. And I hope that we do that at some point. I would love to go and see Saru's home planet. I think that's really going to be a really neat place to go. But Doug Jones is great. You know, he's got such a small body. Like, holy smokes, that's just insane how thin that guy is. Like, the guy like weighs like what my leg weighs, I'm sure. You know, but he's got such a crazy physique. But I love Saru. But do we want to talk about the Vogue Tyler theory at all today? Or are we tired of talking about that?
Oh man, you know,
Tom, let's hear your perspective. What do you think? Have you heard the rumors?
Have I heard the rumours? I've heard nothing but the rumours. If I never hear about it again, I'll probably be quite happy, you know. It's... Now, I'll be completely honest, I don't kind of immerse myself in Star Trek fandom that much, mainly because I'm kind of busy with the Twilight Zone and stuff like that. So if I hadn't have heard it on podcasts or read it on Facebook, I don't think I would really have guessed it is a possibility up until maybe this last episode, where I'm kind of thinking, wait a minute. And I am a little bit sick of it. And I don't mean any disrespect to anyone, because it's a legitimate thing to discuss. But I don't think it's the fault of the show, because something's definitely going on there, you know what I mean? Something's definitely there. But I think they would have preferred you not to really have picked up on it until really late on, and then you look back at those episodes and think, actually, when he said this or when Lorca said that. So I don't think it's the fault of the show, because I just think the fans picked up on it so quickly that it's been the topic of conversation ever since. And, you know, I am a bit like worn out with it.
I agree with what you're saying, but I kind of think that for that very reason, it is the fault of the show. I think that if they would have done a better job of hiding it, or if they would have realized earlier on that Star Trek fans are going to obsess over every single little detail and figure this out in about 2 minutes, then they would have, you know, shortened the gap between introducing it and, you know, actually like revealing it for real. And then that would completely shift the conversation to something different from what it is now, which is, like you're saying, everyone just talking about it. And I think that, you know, we're kind of like in that sort of like obsessive, you know, sort of like speculation that we have about this, we're missing. I mean, I keep on thinking about this, and it makes me mad that I've done this now. But like when Westworld was on, there was all these fan theories about all these different things. And there was some critic, I don't even remember who it was, but some critic was like, everyone is so focused on what is going to happen on Westworld that they're not paying attention to what is happening on Westworld. The twists don't matter. What's interesting is all of this crazy philosophical stuff which is going on in this show right now. And I read that before I started watching Westworld, and because of that, I sort of like actively did not try to put any pieces together. I just watched it as it came. And I kind of wish that I would have done that with Discovery, but I didn't. And it wasn't until like a week ago that I was sort of like reminded of that idea. And if this whole thing wasn't here, I don't know. I don't know how I would view the show differently, but I definitely would. And I think that that's kind of too bad in a sense. But I blame the creators, because, you know, they're the ones who implanted this early on in the show and, you know, didn't really do a very good job of hiding it at all. So there you go.
I got to go back to what Tom said. I don't know that I would have caught it had I not been reading all the fan theories as well. So clearly I didn't catch it, because right after the episode aired, somebody messaged me on Twitter and they're like, everybody thinks, like right after the 5th episode aired, everybody thinks that Voq is Tyler. And I'm like, what? Who's Tyler? You know, because I didn't catch the name yet. I'm so bad with character names. And then once he told me he's like the guy on the ship, I'm like, I don't think that. And then everybody started having all the evidence, and they're looking on IMDb, and like I'm like, oh, okay, fine, yeah, okay, whatever. But I don't think I would have picked up on it either. But it's like I said in the last episode of the podcast. It's just people are just expecting twists now, that they're coming up with these elaborate theories to everything because they don't want to be caught off guard. You know, I don't think we can go, even if a show were just like out there, like if somebody were to watch The Twilight Zone for the first time after watching all of these TVs, they'd be like, how are these episodes connected? Oh my goodness, that guy, did you see they use the same actor in this episode? It's the same thing. Like, I'm sure that people would be doing that, even though They're just expecting some type of twist nowadays.
Well, what you do get, I mean, which I found to be really interesting, is, living in like a post-Sixth Sense world and going back and watching Twilight Zone for the first time and, sort of like knowing the gimmick or whatever. Like, I am always looking for the twist in the Twilight Zone now in a way that I don't think people were back in 1959 or whatever, So, I mean, you're right, that viewing habits have definitely changed. And, someone like Rod Serling was way ahead of the curve in that regard. But now I feel like you're saying TV, well, because everyone's expecting it, TV shows feel the need to do it when they probably shouldn't. And, some people are better at it than others. Not everyone's Rod Serling,
Yeah. But even the Twilight Zone, like the Twilight Zone had so many twists in the ending that, yes, you are looking for them. And some of them aren't very good twists. No. Like one of my favorite episodes of the Twilight Zone, Tom just recently covered, is the Midnight Sun. Like that's top 5 Twilight Zone for me. I love it. And it, everybody go, when you're done listening to this, go and listen to Tom's coverage of the Midnight Sun, because see the episode first if you haven't. But, the feel of the show, like that's a show that's just, going back to our first topic, I'm sorry, is so paced, and it's a very slow episode, but it's beautiful. It's an absolute masterpiece of the original Twilight Zone. And the twist at the end of it is not very good. But if you're trying to predict the twist the whole time and not paying attention to what's going on screen, you really do lose the enjoyment of the episode. And, I like that you said that. I might find that article and take a look at it. But yeah, people are always trying to find a twist for something that they're just not enjoying what they're watching anymore.
Yeah, and it really has kind of reached fever pitch with Discovery. I mean, I remember early on, and no disrespect to the person who said it, I can't remember who said it, but it was on one of the Trek FM shows, and someone was like, well, that Tilly, she pulled her phaser out pretty quickly. I think there's something going on with her, and to me, I just didn't really see it. It was just like, I think they just want to show that, yeah, she's a little different maybe, but she's still a good, effective officer, and it probably doesn't help that Lorca is quite a mysterious character as well. So we're always kind of guessing what his motives are. But I think for me, I really have tried to take a step back from that and just let it happen, really.
Like, just picture going back to season 1 of The Next Generation with Data, and, looking at Data and be like, oh, that android smiled. There's way more to him than you think there is. Look at the way he's smiling at him, and oh, man, that's not a whistle, that's a secret code.
Well, we did that, have that with Deep Space Nine. I mean, Garrick, they totally wrote that character that way, so much so that you don't even really know by the end, like, exactly what his deal is,
Yeah. Anywho, we got some great characters, a lot of great stuff here. Let's focus on the story. So we've got this story going on, and there's kind of a lot of different little stories going on here. We've got this Klingon war that was started in this prologue. And Michael Burnham is now this mutineer, and she's been sentenced to life imprisonment for being a mutineer on her starship and causing this war. And I got to admit, that was a really awesome surprise. I did not see that coming. That was not spoiled for me in any way. And I was like, whoa, where are they going to take this show? What is going on? And she's brought to this ship, this science ship, that's testing out this new type of transportation. It's been known as the spore drive. And they're using this spore drive in a way to try and fight the Klingons by being able to just go in and out quickly. By being able to strike, jump in, strike, and jump out, and get out of the way. And it's something that the Klingons aren't able to, defend against until they get this cloaking technology. So we've really got this season-long arc that's primarily the first major conflict, I would say, unless I'm forgetting something, the first major conflict between the Federation and the Klingons, like an all-out war. Am I missing something, or is there something that I'm forgetting about a previous major Klingon war?
I'm sure this is the start of it, right? It's got to be.
Pretty much, yeah. This is going to lead up into Errand of Mercy, right? Like if this were to last 10 seasons. I don't know if they go chronologically, then we'll end up at Errand of Mercy, right? We don't know really where the story's going to go. But Brian Fuller had originally indicated in interviews that it was going to be a major event that had been mentioned in Star Trek history. And I got to say, this isn't what I was expecting. How do you guys feel about it being this Klingon Federation war? Mike?
Well, I guess it makes total sense when you think about it, especially when you hear what, Fuller's original idea for this show was in terms of making it, an anthology series and all that stuff. I mean, this is kind of a major turning point in the history of the Federation and the start of their most contentious relationship, with sort of like their big baddies, right? The Klingons. And the history of, the Federation and the Klingons and, their relationship and the way that it's changed from the original series to Next Generation and everything. I mean, it's a huge part of the mythology. So if you're going to have a prequel series, dealing with that specific event makes kind of perfect sense. But just to touch on one little thing that you said about how, like, you didn't realize that, Burnham was going to be, sentenced to life imprisonment for mutiny and everything, and how, it's surprising where this show has gone. I think that that's another thing that makes, these twists like the Tyler Voke thing kind of frustrating, because, like, this show is not relying on twists, and yet I'm always surprised by where it's going. I don't know where it's going next. I mean, when we got on to Discovery, I was like, okay, I have no idea what's going on here. And then when you get to the next episode and you start, I mean, the way that they sort of like reveal things and are not like boxed into a formula or anything like that, I think is really impressive, and it's really exciting. And we don't need to have twists and still be surprised by this show. And I think that's, kind of frustrating, I guess. One of the reasons why having these twists is kind of frustrating, because it is doing what I guess you would hope a twist would do, but in a much more effective way, over the course of the entire series. Anyway, sorry.
Amy?
Yeah, the story, I think I get a little confused sometimes because there are so many little individual stories that are going on, I guess, character moments, but when I look at the story, I love that it's about the Klingons, and I love that it's, trying to figure out this whole war thing and trying to end the war. I think it's definitely stressed with Lorca and his desire to end the war. And but sometimes the little stories and, what the fans are saying about Voke and Tyler and, Michael's personal, redemption story that fits in with that, and Tilly's innocence and trying to fit in with that, and where is she in the, fitting in with the crew, and why is a cadet on this major, first-time science vessel. Like, some of those things get a little distracting to the overall story, but I really enjoy the story, and I'm looking forward to see where it ends up after the first season, and even more interested to know, is this the story that's going to continue into season 2, or are we going to get a brand new story?
Mm-hmm. Tom, what do you think of the story so far?
I think this probably ties into me coming to it with not much baggage. This was my return to Star Trek. I think I was one of those people who kind of thought, well, can't you just jump it on a few years from the Next Generation or something and have a completely fresh start? But, it was never a deal breaker. I can understand why they didn't do that, because you have the Next Gen, but now you've got the Kelvin timeline, so they'd have to really make a decision. Which future are we in here? So they went back again, I guess. But story-wise, it's great. I don't know what's going to happen next. I don't know. We might lose some more people along the way, and that's really. I think in the past, 99.9% of the time, we always knew that everyone was going to survive and everyone was going to be in the next episode. We have our Tasha Yars along the way, but that's quite rare. But now I really do think that, you know, we might lose some people along the way, and that's quite refreshing. So I love the story. It's great.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting because, you know, we did have our major death in episode 2 was really when we had our major deaths. Mm-hmm. We had Takuvma dying, who I thought was going to be in the whole season for sure. I did not see that coming. And then we had Georgiou die, who I kind of did see coming. Like, you know, the way that they, especially after watching the first episode and seeing that there was no crew and no Discovery, I'm like, okay, something's going to happen here. But we've had 2 major characters die, but that's way back in our prologue for the series. And I don't think that we're going to get any major character deaths. I think that they might stick to the traditional Star Trek route going forward.
Sorry, can I just ask you something though, Brandon? Because your theory was that Voq was going to kill Lorca, Ash was going to sort of, you know, Voq was going to emerge and kill Lorca either at this half-season mark that you thought that might happen?
My original thought was going to be the end of the first season.
Okay.
So like 6 episodes from now. But now that they've gone into this, which we'll get into our predictions later on, now that they've gone completely off the rails, right, with this whole parallel dimension thing, which I'm guessing they're going to be in for a few episodes, I don't necessarily think that that's going to happen anymore.
Because I don't really read Star Trek stuff, I just kind of see what's on the show each week. I wondered, has Jason Isaacs only signed up for 1 season or something? Because I've also heard other people thinking that Jason Isaacs is going to die, so I wondered whether you
I
know
haven't
something.
read anything.
Okay.
Yeah, I try not to read any. I try and get as little spoilers as possible. I don't read, you know, the predicting sites. Really, just because of how prevalent the Voq Tyler theory was is the only reason I was exposed to it, and because it's discussed on every podcast. I really try and stay away from the spoilers myself. So I'm just predicting. I don't go on IMDb and see how many episodes somebody's going to be in. You know, like I don't check that stuff out. That's not me, and that's not how I want to watch a show. But what Tom's referring to is back when they were talking about Voq and whether or not he was Tyler, I had said with the Tribble being on Captain Lorca's desk, I'm like, at the end of the season, you know, Tyler's going to show up in Lorca's room. The Tribble's going to freak out. Tyler's going to realize who he is, and to keep the secret, he'll kill Lorca and somehow get away with it. I don't know how. I'm not a writer. But we will know for sure that Voq is a Klingon, but the rest of the ship won't. That was my original theory. I don't think that's going to happen anymore. And I'm okay with that. It's part of it is fun guessing, but you know, I almost want to stop predicting what's happening. And of course, the final section of our podcast today is going to be on predictions, but you know, what we think is going to happen. But yeah, it's interesting. It's really interesting. I didn't expect it to be the Klingon storyline when we were going into Star Trek Discovery 2 years ago. So once we found out it was going to be the Klingons, I was surprised. I didn't expect it to be this event. So let's move in. Let's talk about our predictions. Where do we think it's going to go for the second half of the season? You know, because that's kind of a pretty tidy solution. Like that's like if we go with it, it's done. The ship's exploded. The ship of the dead is gone. Cole's dead. Like the camera was inside the ship when that flame was coming through and was destroying that ship. Cole's dead. He's a goner. And they're somewhere else. You know, the screenshot's been around that Captain Lorca himself did some kind of override and caused them to go into this wherever they are. Whether it's a parallel universe or what, we don't know. Tom, let's start with you as the guest. What are your predictions for the second half of the season?
Oh, man. You know, I'm going to have to try and do the thing I said that I wasn't going to do now. But
yes, you are.
I don't have any great predictions, to be honest. Obviously, people have been talking mirror universes, parallel universes. And I think whenever you do a new iteration of anything, you know, take, for example, Doctor Who. Whenever there's a new Doctor, everyone's waiting for them to... When's he going to meet the Daleks or something? When's he going to... because it recreates the character each time, that relationship with a particular thing in their universe. So it wouldn't surprise me if it was them going to the mirror universe, because, that's going to make some fans happy, but not others. And I'll be honest, I'm so out of Trek that I don't know exactly how the mirror universe works. Is there just one of them? Is there many of them? I don't really know.
Well, let me tell you, we've got another hour to talk about this. There was this... No, I'm just kidding. There's too much to talk. In a nutshell, Star Trek has had one mirror universe that they've tied. They've basically, some reason they're connected to this one mirror universe, and that's the mirror universe we saw in Mirror Mirror back in the original series.
So, so that mirror universe, is that the same one they went to in Deep Space Nine?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Well, it wouldn't surprise me if they did go back to that, because, like I said, when you have a new iteration of something, I think it is interesting to see how are they going to handle this. What are they going to do with it? Like the Doctor, what's the new Doctor going to do with the Daleks this time? How's he going to face them? So, I don't have any predictions, but if it turns out that that's what it is, then great. I'll sit back and see what happens.
Mm-hmm. Amy?
Yeah, these whole prediction things, and like I said, I know what the fans are saying and talking about, and so I just sort of read what they have to say, and I don't know if it's mirror, but alternate dimension. I mean, those anomalies. So I think that, yeah, they're in an anomaly, and what that holds, I don't know. I've thought that maybe this whole thing that we've seen up until now was sort of a fake thing, and so that maybe we will get to the real timeline, that what we've been watching so far is a alternate timeline. I love the idea, because I like Next Gen, like parallels, these parallel universes, and I like the idea of seeing things if different actions were taken or choices that were made, how would that lead to certain events? So I'm fine with, quote unquote, resetting, hit the reset button, and what if this choice was made, So I'm open for it. I'm very, very excited to see what's going to happen.
Mike, do you think that they're actually in the Kelvin timeline now?
No, I wish, but I don't think they are. I think they're in the mirror universe, and I think that this is going to be kind of like the time loop episode, where what happens in the mirror universe isn't going to be necessarily significant to the overall story, but the act of them getting into the mirror universe, I think, is going to be significant, and perhaps getting out as well. I think that the plot of this arc is going to be kind of like its own thing or whatever, but the thing which is going to tie into the rest of the season is the fact that Lorca did it and what that means and all that stuff. But I think while we're in the mirror universe, I think we're going to see Mirror Giorgio. I wouldn't be surprised if we see a couple of other characters who might not be with us anymore.
Mirror Harry Mudd.
Yeah, I don't know. I think we're going to see Mirror Giorgio. I'm
Yes.
almost 100% positive of that. But watch, it's not going to happen. But so I think it's going to be fun, and then I think the tone, obviously, of the whole series, I think, has shifted from it being this massive war on sort of a naval battle scale to more of a political thriller sort of thing with Laurel and Voke and Tyler and everything, and I think that we're going to see some sort of quieter, in more personal sort of conflict going on between the Klingons and the humans, and who knows exactly how it's all going to be resolved. But I mean, somehow or another, I mean, there will be no more war, right? Or at least it'll become a Cold War. I mean, they've said that flat out, so we shall see. And I also kind of think that Lorca is going to be gone at the end of the season because he's so shady. I don't really see... I mean, unless there's... even if there is a form of redemption there, I don't really see him being the captain of this show going forward, when presumably it's going to start becoming a bit lighter, maybe? I don't know. That's my guess for season 2.
Well, my prediction for the remainder of the season is I'm going to love it just as much as the first half. That's my only prediction. So, and I'm going to cop out with that one here. Is there any other topics we want to cover here before we do our final thoughts? Anything? Or actually, well, here's our final thoughts. Anything else you guys want to say on the first half of the season? Tom?
You know, I am clearly way out of touch with Trek because I've been out of the game so long. But ever since Discovery started, I've been rewatching Next Generation. I even started Enterprise the other day. I plan to watch Deep Space Nine for the first time. I think it's done such a great job of being a new show, but also really making me feel that love for Trek again. That, you know, any little gripes here and there, I don't really have any. I think it's done a great job, and I'm glad it came because I'm rediscovering Star Trek again now, and that's such a great thing for me.
Mm-hmm. Well, Tom, let me know when you get to Future Tense, which is in Season 2 of Enterprise. That's my favorite. I'm not going to hype it up or anything. It's just my favorite episode. That's all I'll tell you. Tell me what you think of it when you get to there.
Mm-hmm. Will do.
Amy, Mike, any last thoughts? Any final thoughts on Season 1, Part 1?
Yeah, I've come across a question that people have asked, and it's like, well, if you didn't love Star Trek, would you be enjoying Discovery? And I think that's an interesting question to ask. And as I, talk about it, like I have a student, I've mentioned it on postcards before, a student who's watching, and this is her very first Trek ever, because she's just a teenager. And so I see her excitement for it, and I think, man, I want to have that just, this is new Star Trek, and to love it, and I just see it through her eyes, and I'm pretty confident that I would be enjoying Discovery if I hadn't already loved Star Trek. I think the story and the characters and the visuals, I mean, everything that we've talked about on this episode so far is why I am enjoying Discovery so much. And so I think that that's interesting because I am so involved in Star Trek and the past and Next Gen and, with Trek FM and listening to what the fans have to say. I just sort of wonder, is that, causing me to, sort of have this hindsight and that I'm going to love Star Trek no matter what. But I think that this show really is doing very well, and it works for me. So
I'm very impressed with the show so far. I'm still kind of trying to reserve judgment until I see the whole thing before talking about it, on the whole. But I mean, right now, like looking at where it's at and we're only 9 episodes in, like I see the potential for this show to be great, to be Deep Space Nine level good. As it stands, I mean, only after 9 episodes, and who knows what's going to happen in the final 6. But if they keep on going on the track that they're on, I mean, I could very easily, I could almost definitely see this being, one of my top 2 favorite Star Trek shows, ever. Maybe right behind Deep Space Nine, and we'll see what the future seasons have in store and everything. I mean, obviously, who knows and all that good stuff. But I'm super excited about it right now. I think that they've been doing a fantastic job. Certainly, there are things about it which I don't like. That's true of everything. But on the whole, I've been incredibly impressed with this show.
Well said, Mike. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I think it's been outstanding as well. And I'm all I can say is I'm looking forward to seeing where it's going to go, and it's been a fun ride, and I'm very, very thankful that we finally have Star Trek back on TV. And I only remember 2 years ago when I got the first news, and I jumped for joy and went woohoo, like really loud. Like I was very excited that we were finally getting it back on TV, because this is where I think Star Trek needs to be, and I'm really, really enjoying it. So thanks everybody for having this wonderful discussion tonight. I really appreciate it. Tom, why don't you tell everybody where they can find you if they want to get mad at you for saying that the Klingons look good the way they are?
Sure. Well, if you want to check out the Twilight Zone podcast, then it is at thetwilightzonepodcast.com, and it'd be great to see you there. Or I do a superhero podcast called Lost in the Omniverse, which is at strangeanddeadly.com, where our good friend Brandy Jacola also has her podcast. So, but thank you guys. You guys you're the best at what you do, and I think you do such a great job here at Trek FM that it's been a real pleasure sitting down with you today. So thank you.
I can't wait to listen to your podcast on all the Marvel superheroes to see what your thoughts are on Flash.
Well, I have to jet, so I'm going to give my contact information right now. It's a date night with the wifey. We're going to go for Chinese food tonight. So you can find me on Twitter at Brandon-Mutala. You can find me here on the network with Melodic Treks. No, you can't. I'm all done Melodic Treks. You can find me here on the network with Warp 5, which is all about Star Trek Enterprise, and I host that with my good friend Floyd Dorsey. And you can find me over on the Fandom Podcast Network with my friends Chris and Tom, and we have a little podcast called Good Evening, an Alfred Hitchcock podcast. Well, thanks everybody for joining us. Talking about the first half of the season on Star Trek Discovery is not the only thing we've been discussing here on the network. So take a quick listen to this little clip and see what else you may have missed elsewhere on Trek FM.
Previously on Trek.fm, Standard Orbit.
Fan consensus has sort of said, look, third season is terrible and awful and woeful, and a lot of it is. But you go back and you watch it, and there's a lot of it that carries over. Like, there's a lot of stuff that is, I think of like as quintessentially Star Trek. That sort of you see develop over the course of the third season.
The 602 Club.
There was a lot of screaming involved. I'll start with... You know what I'm talking about.
Snowball! 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 Yes. No, I know what you mean.
No,
I did
a lot
too.
of... Oh my god! It's a Demogorgon!
Warp 5.
You had to learn to not interfere, and it's painful, and that's what makes it such a powerful episode. So this is definitely a see it. Okay, next.
All right. Sleeping dogs. While exploring a gas...
Skip it.
Okay. All right, so Shadows of I think we already know what this one is.
keep going with the sleeping dogs.
The Edge, a Star Trek Discovery podcast.
It's like when Tyler was, explaining the situation and seeing it, and he was explaining it to Tyler, it's like he was almost apologizing for it. Like, I had to do this to save my life, and I'm still alive because I did this. But is he suffering guilt for that?
And that's what else is happening on Trek.fm.
Check out all of these shows and join the conversation about your favorite corner of the Star Trek universe and beyond. You'll find us wherever you get your podcasts. If you're an Apple user, be sure to hit the subscribe button in Apple Podcasts on iPhone, iPad, or Apple TV, or the desktop iTunes app to get the latest episodes as soon as they are published. And please leave us a star rating and written review. If you're not an Apple user, we've got you covered as well. You can find our shows on Google Play Music, Stitcher, TuneIn, Spreaker, SoundCloud, Windows Phone, in most third-party apps, and you can stream and download the MP3 file from our website or grab the RSS link.
Okay, so now that those guys are gone, let's get into the nitty-gritty, the good stuff, right? Fan reaction. We have a note from Mark, right?
Yes. After our last episode of The Edge, Mark Rodriguez said, "Best Discovery podcast ever. Thank you, Amy, Sarah, and Brandon. You engaged in a deep, honest, and heartfelt discussion on some difficult topics that were involved in the episode. It's great that you come from different backgrounds with different perspectives, which is what IDIC is all about. I am a former prosecutor in the Domestic Violence Bureau here in New York, so I dealt a lot with sexual assault. However, from within an already established domestic relationships. This podcast is a must-listen, in my opinion. My appreciation of Discovery is growing because of this podcast. Thanks."
Thank you very much, Mark. I have to say that I agree with Mark that your discussion was really good. I know that I mentioned that to you guys off air, but I thought that you did a really, really good job of handling what was obviously a very challenging topic to discuss. We're used to being like, oh, Star Trek, Tribbles, the Gorn, hey, and then they throw this in there, and it's like, okay, yeah, I guess this really is why we watch Star Trek. This really is what Star Trek is about, dealing with like important, relevant, tough issues, and you guys did a really good job.
Well, and I want to just plug our upcoming episodes of The Edge, where we are going to look into the themes that Discovery has brought into, our homes and some of the social commentaries there. So I think, not just the aesthetics and, oh, this is cool, we have Star Trek, but getting into the nitty gritty of it all. For me, that's what Star Trek is. So I'm really looking forward to sort of having these off weeks, like we said, to digest and internalize what Discovery is teaching us.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing them too. It's exciting stuff. Well, if you want to be like Mark and contact us, we'd love to hear your thoughts on today's show, and there are many ways for you to do that. The best place is to join the larger conversation on the Babel Conference, which is our listeners group on Facebook. Just type Babel, that's Babel, into the search field on Facebook, and it should come right up. If you'd like to send us an email, you can use the form on our website at trek.fm/contact, choose to send to a show, and select The Edge. That will come right to us. You can also find the network on Twitter at TrekFM and on Facebook at facebook.com/TrekFM. Amy, where can people find you on the internet?
Well, you can find me here on Trek FM, on The Edge, and get to take a little hiatus from Postcards from the Edge, so that's nice. But you can find me every week on Earl Grey, and that's our podcast for covering the next generation. I am on Twitter at Miss Amy Nelson, but favorite place is on that Babel Conference. So, Mike, what about yourself? Where can people talk to you?
You can find me right here on Trek FM doing a show called Stage 9, where we look at the people who make Star Trek. And you can also find me on thenerdparty.com doing a show called Great Shot Kit. And you can find me on my website, commentarytrackstars.com, doing a show called Commentary Track Stars. And you can find me on Twitter at Mumbles3K. We'd like to thank our associate producers on The Edge, Norman C. Lau, Tony Robinson, Thomas Puleo, Lisa Slack, Shoaib Mirza, and Richard Rutledge. Thank you very much for all your support, guys. If you want to be like our associate producers and help us keep all of our shows coming to you each week, you can become a patron of the network on Patreon. Just visit patreon.com/TrekFM. That's patreon.com/TrekFM to get all the details. Perks include early access to episodes, exclusive content, producer credits, and more available through our special patrons website, Patron Zone. It requires a great deal of money to produce, host, and distribute these shows each month. We really appreciate any support you can give us and hope you'll join the team. Again, you can find all the details at patreon.com/TrekFM. Well, I guess that's it, right? Made it through the first half of Disco. Only 6 episodes left. And then we can go into hibernation for like a year.
Yeah, who knows?
Yeah. But we know that there is going to be a new Discovery after this. We know that there is going to be a season 2. That's confirmed. So don't cancel those CBS All Access subscriptions quite yet. You never know when it might pop up. It might be, Tuesday or who knows, right?
That's right.
But in the meantime, thanks for joining us, and we'll talk to you soon.